RCMP are investigating the murder of a man in a crack house known as the House of Horrors. They learn a woman has been beaten in the bathroom of the same house. At the same time, a body is discovered floating in the waters of the Fraser River near Vancouver, British Columbia. The body is transported to the morgue at the Royal Columbian Hospital in New Westminster. The pathologist conducts an autopsy on the badly decomposing body.
Une autopsie médico-légale.
A forensic autopsy involves a number of steps. When the body arrives, the first step is an external examination. We look at the clothes and the skin. We're looking for signs of cuts or tears in the clothes, or signs of trauma in the skin. Is there any evidence there? Are there fragments of fiber that were torn from the attacker? Are there any body fluids from the attacker, blood or semen? So we might take samples of any number of different things found on the clothes and skin. Then we undress the body, and we go through the same procedure without the clothes.
When the body bag is opened, the sex is confirmed, but nothing is found that might help identify the woman.
Bodies in water, especially when it's cold, probably decompose less than if you had the body on the outside where it's exposed to the elements. She actually had a piece of the packaging tape wrapped around the back of her head, through her mouth, and then around to the back of her head again. So her face was distorted quite a bit.
She was wearing a sweater and a pair of jeans, which might not have that much significance, except for the jeans were very obviously not her pants. They were brand new pants. They still had stickers and tags on them, and they were too small. Somebody had had a struggle actually putting this clothing on her.
7 stab wounds were found on the woman's arms, back, and thighs. Yet there is no evidence of cuts or tears in her clothing.
I did look at her hands because I knew that I'd eventually have to fingerprint her, and she had degloved, which is a way of saying that the outer layer of her skin had come off. But even at that, she was in very good shape, and I had no reason to believe that I wouldn't be able to get a good set of fingerprints from her that would be identifiable.
Le liquide qui s'accumule dans le corps.
As a result of decomposition, moisture accumulates in the body between the outer layer of the skin, the epidermis, and a deeper layer called the dermis. And the epidermis becomes detached. Around the hands, we are left with something like a glove, which must be removed very, very carefully. The forensic expert puts on a latex glove to protect their hand and then fits the salvaged skin over it in order to take the fingerprints. If this skin glove has been lost in the water and we have been unable to retrieve it, the forensic expert can still take fingerprints from the dermis. It's not as effective, but it still works.
The victim's hands and ankles have been tied with yellow rope.
They might be some unusual knot that a person might link to some particular job or hobby. And if it's preserved properly, the knot specialist can look at it and maybe give us some information.
The rope bindings we took some interest in and spent a little time on that. We sent those off actually to a rope expert to determine knots and how they were tied, and we try to use that as a tie-in later on in the investigation.
Once the victim's hands are untied, the forensic technician can start taking fingerprints.
First at the postmortem, it was not possible to get a good set of fingerprints from her, so unfortunately we had to remove all of the fingers. As soon as we were finished the postmortem, we came back and we got 4 digits that were very, very good.
Often when we find someone like that and we don't know who they are, that's the first thing we'll check. It's the easiest, because if they've ever been involved in the justice system, we'll have their fingerprints on file. The only other reason we do it is for other people who pass away and we already know their identity. If they do have a criminal record, we'll take their fingerprints simply to send them into Ottawa so they can be removed from the national data bank.
Fred Rolston sends the prints from the 4 digits to the Vancouver database for verification. No matches are found. So the prints are sent on to be checked against the national database in Ottawa. Despite Rolston's efforts, the second search yields nothing.
I spent some time again, and I got all 10 digits. Contacted Ottawa. It took them maybe a couple hours, and it came back, and again, it was negative. I was disappointed because I felt if she'd been fingerprinted previously, there was no reason why they couldn't identify her, but they didn't.
The fingerprints provide no leads. Have the investigators come up against the perfect crime? The team must now look for other clues that might reveal the woman's identity.
There was a large scorpion tattoo with red eyes, and I think there was 2 red dots in the tail on her upper left shoulder. The scorpion tattoo was kind of the thing that we focused on in the early stages of the investigation as a possible means of identifying her.
They are now banking on the scorpion tattoo. Despite the condition of the body, they are able to take a clear photo. They release it to the media throughout the province. In the meantime, Constable Rolston receives fingerprints from 4 people who have been reported missing. He compares them to the victim's fingerprints. Once again, there are no matches. Then he receives another lead.
Finally, someone had phoned in and said that there was a missing person in Coquitlam that they hadn't seen for some time, so had one of our members go over to Coquitlam, pick up the prints, and brought them back.
A week has now passed since the body was discovered, and the investigators are still empty-handed. Will this latest lead help them solve the mystery of the victim's identity? A woman's body is found in the Fraser River near a dock in New Westminster, British Columbia. It's badly decomposed. The arms and legs are tied. The investigators have just received the fingerprints of a missing woman from the neighboring city of Coquitlam. This time, the prints match. The woman can finally be identified. Her name is Annette Allen.
I know that she was from Saskatchewan. I believe that she had a mom still in Saskatchewan, and I believe that she had a brother as well.
Annette has lived in British Columbia for some time, but she has no family there. Her disappearance was never reported.
She had started dating an individual who was heavy into drug use and the drug trade, and he went off to jail actually a short time after they started dating, and Annette moved into a relative's of his because she came and went and wasn't very consistent with the way that she lived her life. The lady that she was living with didn't even realize that she was missing until her body was found, and they broadcast through the media the pictures of the tattoos.
In cases like this, especially where there is trauma that may have contributed to the death, it is standard procedure to order toxicology tests. The results reveal high levels of drugs in Annette's system, consistent with those of a drug addict.
She did have what would be a textbook lethal dosage of heroin in her system. She also had cocaine and I believe alcohol.
Once Annette's identity is discovered, the New Westminster Police Department contacts Peter Cross. They believe there is a connection to the John Doe case he is currently working on.
And so we investigated a little further, and we were able to tie the girl to this particular house that we were already investigating.
The case is immediately transferred to the Surrey detachment of the RCMP, and Peter Cross becomes the lead investigator. The investigators learned that Annette Allen used to frequent The Stroll, an area of Whalley where prostitutes ply their trade. They also discovered that she was with a woman named Joanna Larson on April 22nd, the day she was last seen alive.
Joanna Larson had brought her to that house. And the information at that time was that Joanna Larson had a beef with Annette Allen. And there's where sort of the real crux of the investigation started. What happened in that house?
It was linked quite quickly that she had passed away in that house or that it had started there.
The investigators still do not have enough evidence to make an arrest. So a second, more thorough search of the house is ordered.
We took the drain pipes out of the house. We did everything. I would say we spent in total probably 2.5, 3 days examining that house.
Peter Cross has heard disturbing rumors about the backyard of the House of Horrors.
We had so much information of people coming forward, the street people in particular. We thought we've got to cover this off. There's just too many people talking about bodies in the backyard.
For this second search, he decides to use an untried technology called ground-penetrating radar. At the time, Cross is one of the first people in his detachment to use it.
You can use it for pretty well anything. What you get is just like a radar image that you would see on a scope that you see when they're running radar anywhere. And it will bring out the shape and size. So if you're looking for a coffin or you're looking for a shotgun, the shape will actually come back at you. And what it measures is the disturbances in the soil. If you're looking for a body, it's going to show up as a body.
The radar reveals no sign of bodies buried in the backyard.
Well, we sort of came to the conclusion that this was one of the ways they threatened people that were coming into the house.
The second search warrant leads to the discovery of 27 DNA profiles in the house. But it does not yield a single trace of Annette Allen or any evidence of her murder. Either the informants are lying, or someone has done a very thorough job of covering up their crime.
To this day, we have still 27 unknown DNA profiles. All those DNA profiles are blood profiles. So that's blood that's been expended in that house from 27 different people. And we still have yet to tie it into anybody in particular.
The House of Horrors is shut down, and Joe Lagasse is arrested and charged as an accessory to the murder of Annette Allen. But he is quickly released.
After the preliminary hearing, I decided the evidence simply wasn't there in regards to Lagasse, so he was not charged on indictment with murder or manslaughter.
Although he was a promising suspect, Lagasse now walks away a free man.
It was a legal decision as opposed to a common sense decision, in my opinion, because of the legal loopholes in what his role was. I think the average member of the public, when they hear what his role was, they would say, well, of course he's guilty. The problem is the legal system doesn't necessarily match up to what the average Joe thinks.
The only leads the investigators have left are eyewitness accounts that point to two possible suspects, Joanna Larson and Francis Gauthier.
Joanna Larson and Francis Gauthier would be considered friends. Francis was kind of the doorman of that house, worked and lived there, and Jojo went there all the time. We had information which made us believe that the two of them had actually discussed committing a homicide, and that they kind of jibed at each other at points saying, oh, you couldn't kill anybody, or you couldn't do it.
The witnesses are drug addicts, and this does not help matters. Peter Cross is not sure their accounts are reliable.
The nature of their drug illness makes them extremely difficult to deal with and extremely difficult to corroborate their information and count on.
Cross decides to forge ahead with what little information he has.
The investigative avenue we thought would work and would be our best avenue was the undercover route.
The first undercover operation targets Joanna Larson. It's not long before she's providing information about her role in the death of Annette Allen.
She was definitely, in my opinion, a braggart. Like, she was quite pleased to talk about it.
It turns out that Larson had previously taken part in a robbery and was convinced that Allen had been an informant.
We could confirm later on, obviously, that she wasn't in that case, but that was their belief, was that she was ratting them out.
There was also a $20 drug debt in there too, that Annette owed someone $20, and that this was a bit of a point of contention with Joanna as well. Annette showed up and they kind of coerced her into the house on the premise that, you know, she was going to be given some drugs. And I think it was pretty immediate after she entered the house, and that they tied her up and put her in the bathtub.
Annette Allen is assaulted, stabbed, and beaten with a hammer. Larson boasts about the part she played in the attack, but says a man named Francis Gauthier was the instigator.
Basically, Joanna Larson confessed to being there and what happened, but put the majority of the blame on Mr. Gauthier.
But Larson's accusation against Gauthier would not be admissible in a court of law. In order for it to be used as evidence, a confession from Gauthier himself would be required.
They knew, certainly, for sure, they knew Gauthier was involved. One thing to know someone's involved, it's another thing to have evidence that you can use against that person. So that's why the second undercover operation was used.
Joanna Larson is arrested and charged with the murder of Annette Allen. Police launched the undercover operation targeting Francis Gauthier.
The challenge, of course, was hoping that they didn't somehow come together once we'd started the second, so that one would talk to the other as to what was going on.
Will Gauthier be as quick as Larson to give information to the undercover operator? Will his story be the same? Will police get the evidence they need to arrest Annette Allen's killer?